Everyone, I thought I would take just a little time to check in with all of you. It's been, well, for me personally, it's been a really rough week. And this is, I should say, culture of economics. We'll save for another post the latest on inflation and jobs and COVID. But today I wanted to briefly talk about what's going on right now. If you're not an econ Twitter person, this is not the week to join, just so you know. And what we've seen in the last week, and again, this really hits me hard personally, so this is all from my perspective. I'm a lot more calm now. That's why we're doing this today and not a few days ago. Last Thursday, Lisa Cook, nomination hearing along with Sarah Bloom Raskin, Philip Jefferson, the last three of Biden's 5 nominees for the Federal Reserve. They had their hearing, and it had some real high points and it had some very dark low points. And I think especially for me, what was hard is I knew this day was coming. I didn't know necessarily that it would come at Lisa, though about 2 years ago, I did. I knew this was coming. What happened to her was well beyond a substantive discussion of her background, her research, her policy work, White House, Treasury, which are all completely in grounds. There was a lot of the hearing that was completely focused on substance, whether it was Sarah Bloom Raskin on climate change risks, the Fed, or Philip Jefferson was asked about employment, inflation, Fed independence. There were actually, all 5 of them were asked about Fed independence and inflation. But like there was a big part of the hearing, Democrats, Republicans, asking questions that should be asked of Federal Reserve governors. This is the moment that Congress weighs in. It's extremely important. Unfortunately, there were one senator in particular who brought the worst of economics into the hearing. And it's not, economics is a reflection of society. Economics has a long, very troubled history with race, with gender, with anti-LGBTQ plus elitism, where you went to college, who your parents are. These are issues economics has struggled with since its beginning. These are issues that the United States has struggled with since the beginning. So, but what was really troubling is that a US Senator asked Lisa Cook about a lie that went directly at her integrity, her person, her character, that began 2 years before, while Lisa was speaking at the American Economics Association on panels about race and economics, race in the economy. Economics was finally having a moment of reflection, long overdue, but it was happening. And Lisa's one of the individuals, one of the few Black women professors of economics in the United States, and she stood up and was explaining why economists needed to recognize the problems and do better, right? So while Lisa was giving that talk, an anonymous forum called Economic Job Market Rumors, a forum that started in 2007, the year that I was on the job market, and has increasingly over time, though it always had parts of it in the beginning, increasingly over time has become a cesspool. A vast majority of the threads that are on economics are focused on attacking women, men of color, LGBTQ, people who, for whatever reason, they deem are not good enough, elite enough to have any kind of success in the profession, whether it's a publication, whether it's a platform, like Lisa was talking at the annual meetings. And so these threads, which sometimes have this little nugget of substance and tie to economics start, and then they go completely off the rails. So while Lisa was speaking, a thread started by an individual who presented himself as a colleague of Lisa Cook's at Michigan State. He told us all that he supported her tenure to assistant professor, but he did not think that her scholarship merited promotion to full professor. He didn't sign his name, but let's talk about re-identification, right? Like Michigan State doesn't have that big of a faculty, and it's not hard to know who has not been a good colleague. Anyway, so setting that aside, I'm not here to pass judgment today. He then posted, copy and pasted Lisa Cook's entire CV into the thread, and then the feeding frenzy started. I mean, he put in his 2 cents about how it's insufficient, the feeding frenzy started. There was an absolutely stupid, long conversation about one of her publications, a paper that was listed as American Economics Review, May volume. I forget what year it was, but it was before this event. And they went wild because the American Economics Review is one of the top journals in economics. It has a very low publication rate, like below, I think it's like 3%. It's fallen over time. It's very low. It's very competitive. Many universities use a top journal publication as a criteria for tenure, right? So these matter. EJMR once had a whole thread about what body part would you cut off to get an AER, right? Like we have a lot of sick problems in economics, but elitism is part of it. Getting published there is part of it. The May volume of May issue of the AER every year for like forever and ever are what are called papers and proceedings. They are a select number of papers, sessions at the American Economics Association annual meeting that are then turned into short papers and published in the AER. It's a way to showcase all of the great research, often more preliminary research, that is happening in economics. It's a neat volume to page through. These are short papers. They cover a lot of ground. Now, mind you, not everyone can publish. These are not, like the acceptance rate, quote unquote, for this is not high. There are hundreds and hundreds of papers presented at the annual meetings. They're selected by a committee at the AEA that decides these are paper sessions that we think the world should see, not just those who were fortunate enough to sit in that room. So, but it's not like being published in all the other months of the AER. The acceptance rate is higher than 3%, I think. I've never actually calculated it, but it's not the whole back and forth with the referees who try and destroy your paper, and it takes 2 years, 3 years to get published, 3 sets of revisions. Like it is a different process, which is good. But they were attacking her because she did not put papers and proceedings in the line in the journal. Like, frankly, most of us don't put that. I mean, now the AEA has put out guidance that like probably should do this, but for like years and years, nobody cared. Everybody knows the May issue is from the annual meetings. In any case, the thread went on. They called her a racial slur at one point, which I will not repeat, but it's, you know, the typical EJMR. What is not typical is that EJMR, that slander, that attack on her integrity, insinuating that she misrepresented her paper to make it sound better than it was, which I know Lisa would never do that. Basically, none of us that listed without the papers and proceedings would do that because everybody knows that that's what this. In any case, it moved from EJMR, and recently, as Lisa was, you know, it was clear she was going to get the governor appointment, or was like top of the list. And then after she got the appointment, this got worse. It moved from EJMR to a Substack. There was a post that was called The Woke Fed, or the Fed's Going Woke. I was attacked in it. Lisa was attacked in it. Lisa's attack was much worse, and it was like full on racist, right? Okay, so we moved, but the racial slur does not show up. So we're improving, I guess, or we're whitewashing it. Okay, so then it moves, that individual who wrote the Substack post then moved to the Daily Caller, wrote a similar attack piece on Lisa. Oh, and in between that, because she had gotten the nomination, John Cochran, who former professor at the University of Chicago, now at the Hoover Institute, took it upon himself to go after Lisa. It was more professional and didn't involve this publication issue, but went at her research, and it's newsflash, the Federal Reserve is not an academic appointment. Thank you. But, you know, qualifications, we should talk all about them, but it was very much tied back to all of this very, very inappropriate discussions of Lisa. So then it moves to the Daily Caller, John Cochran, Harold Dulick, who also has a past of harassing Black students in his PhD classes, moving classes to Martin Luther King Day, asking the Black student, hey, how do you feel about that? So John and Harold are quoted in the Daily Caller piece, and that is the then crossover to a US Senator asking Lisa Cook whether she had embellished her resume. And what's even more absurd is he asked that of all the nominees. The first time when he asked Jay Powell, Jay was like, it's like weirdly specific, and no, I don't think I ever have. As soon as he asked that question, I was told by a Fed journalist that that's for Lisa. So I knew at that point, like 100%, that's going into the Senate. That's really unfortunate. Lisa answered the question with great pause and great poise and dignity. She even, and this was said for almost all the questions, all the nominees, thank you for that question. Yeah, just think about that for a minute, what it would mean to say that. And I know that I couldn't have said it, and I was really upset watching her have to say that. She gave a great answer. It got covered. She was trashed on Fox News. There continues to be, both in private conversations I've had with some people that frankly should know better. On Twitter, they continue to undermine her credentials. That's like people, we've spent an enormous amount of time, those of us who know that these are lies, those of us who know this is absolutely irrelevant for a Fed governor. It's been a total mess. Now, this has been a mess in private for a long time. And by the virtue of Twitter, media sources that want a lot of clicks, US senators that think it's appropriate to bring that kind of trash, though it is their right to do it, they get to ask the questions, into the US Senate. That's where we are. So everybody got to see it. Frankly, those of you who aren't on Econ Twitter even got to see it. And it was, it wasted a lot of time. We are in the middle of a pandemic. Thousands of people are dying every day. Inflation is high. Totally connected to COVID. We have people, particularly those in low-wage jobs, people of color, older individuals, those who have health conditions, who are still shut out of the labor market. We have a child tax credit that expired, throwing millions of children back into poverty. We have a Federal Reserve that is facing its toughest policy year ever. We have a Congress that is like teetering on the edge and trying to get not just economic policy passed, but just policy that might save the planet and preserve democracy. And the elites, the top of the economics profession, is arguing about the qualifications of the first Black woman to serve at the Federal Reserve, and isn't even focused on her actual qualifications for a role at the Federal Reserve. Michigan State already decided she was qualified to be a full professor. The students who sign up for her classes, both the classes at Michigan State, the summer program she did for years for underrepresented minority students in economics, they all thought she was good enough as a teacher. All the journals that have published their work, they thought she was good enough as a scholar. And you know why? Because she is. She served at the CEA, the Council of Economic Advisors, as a macro senior. She served as a deputy She served in the Treasury. Both of these were lower level positions, but that's like what you do at the beginning of your career. And you do it well, and you get promoted. Her CV, if she were a white man from Harvard University, she would be going through the Senate with 100 votes. But she won't go through with 100 votes. She's going to get some Republican votes. And in a month, she is going to be sitting at the boardroom at the Federal Reserve, and she is not going to have to ever answer her a question while she's a Fed governor. Hey, why didn't you put papers and proceedings on? She's going to be asked, Governor Cook, how do you vote? Quarter percentage point, 50? What's your vote? So at the end of the day, that's what matters. But like I said, we don't get to claim this time back. We don't get to claim back the hurt that has been caused. We don't get to claim back the economic policy that should have been made. We don't get to claim back the minutes in the Senate confirmation that should have been focused on appoint nominees to one of the most important institutions in the federal government. So, yeah. I'm angry. I'm not as angry as I was on Thursday. But like I said, I know Lisa's qualified. I know she's going to be an amazing governor at the Fed. I know that's not the last job she's going to have in economic policy. And that's good. It's good for all of us. So I'm so proud of Lisa. I am so not proud of some of my peers. And I'm not perfect either. I'm not here to cast blame. We got to stop this, right? Like, everybody deserves a seat at the table. The Federal Reserve Act, in giving its guidance to the President of the United States and choosing members of the board, introduces and says very explicitly, fair representation is a criteria. They specifically note geography and industries, but it is a principle. The spirit of the Federal Reserve Act, which is the law that governs the Federal Reserve, focuses in a very short piece on guidance to the president, fair representation. Lisa Cook will be the first Black woman to ever serve as a Federal Reserve official. The bar that she had to clear was so high to get that. And it's the law for there to be people at the table on all mentions of diversity, that if you have had for, well over 100 years, Fed officials be primarily white men from elite backgrounds, that's not fair representation. We have a long way to go. Lisa broke a barrier. We'll be breaking that barrier very soon. And we're all better for it. And it was painful to watch, but we are all better for it. So, but that wasn't it this week. Lisa's hearing was on Thursday. Economic job market rumors went nuts. I mean, Fox News went nuts. Econ Twitter went nuts. Like, we're just back and forth and yelling and petitions and, really, I cannot underscore how much time was wasted and how much pain was caused. And then over the weekend, the New York Times, Jeanne Smialek, she wrote a long piece for the Sunday Business Review at the New York Times. Jeanne, I'll mention, is the lead journalist on the Federal Reserve at the New York Times. This is not a puff job. The Federal Reserve is a very complex, complicated institution to cover, and she does it with great skill and professionalism. So she wrote this piece about modern monetary theory. I'm not going to get into what it is. I'm not going to get into the substance today. Her piece, but that's what it focused on. And it highlighted the editors. This is not Jeanne, put a nice picture of Stephanie Kelton on the cover of the Sunday Business Review. And so, of course, Stephanie Kelton has been one of the leaders, one of the most articulate, thoughtful, professional, out there leaders of modern monetary theory. It's gotten increasing attention over time. there are aspects of it that have absolutely had an effect on policy, or at least the policy. No, they have had an effect on policy. They've had an effect on the policy debate. There's actually been like really important synergies across it, and some of the more, elite, mainstream, old school, whatever you want to call them. And that's like part of the massive fiscal relief that happened that has helped millions of people. Yes, it's not been perfect, and yes, we've had some problems. I mean, inflation, please go away. COVID, go away first. But like, this is a discussion to have. This is a really exciting time in economic policy and economics. We could be learning so much right now. Instead, we're like in a cage match. So Stephanie Kelton is featured in the piece, but the piece is about the theory. And has the theory been tested? Is the theory like passing the test, right? Like, well, again, I'm not gonna get into the substance. I highly recommend Jeanne's piece. Jason Furman is quoted as a contrary voice, also very professional what he says. Like, it's clear he doesn't agree with modern monetary theory, and it's kind of clear. Actually, it's not clear, because Stephanie is a very prominent figure in MMT. So a lot of times the, well, frankly, what often comes across as disdain for MMT, it gets wrapped up in Stephanie, because we're very attached to our ideas, and ideas have to have a spokesperson, right? So Stephanie is that, but really the piece was very straight up. Jeanne is a straight up journalist. Okay, so it comes out, and I mean, all of us that know the backstory here, like the fact that countless elite macroeconomist men have attacked MMT, and sometimes really in ways that were questioning of Stephanie's intellectual integrity, like beyond MMT, right? Anyway, so the New York Times piece comes out, and of course, econ Twitter goes way off the rails. I would highly recommend the tweet thread by Larry Summers. That has to be the most entertaining thread I have ever seen him write. I actually agree with a couple tweets in there, not the first one. Yeah, so basically, it's Tuesday about lunchtime, and we're still getting Stephanie, the piece. Not only was Stephanie Kelton attacked, again, the like intellectual integrity, not at the is MMT good or not. That's happening too. Let's have that discussion. That's fine, but let's have that discussion and not a referendum on Stephanie's character. Just like with Lisa Cook, let's talk about the substance, her qualifications for this job, not an academic appointment at Harvard, but this job, she should get that too. But let's separate that, and let's actually not just separate, but like, we shouldn't be talking about like Lisa as questioning her intellectual integrity or her character. I mean, really, like, we're going way beyond anything that economists should be talking about, especially those of us who have really big platforms. With power comes responsibility. Okay, so the cherry on top of this whole debacle, which again, this piece gets a little deep into econ Twitter, but it is starting to show up in journalist pieces, is that by a macroeconomist man, one with a very big public platform, attacked the journalistic integrity of Jeanne. And again, like, I know each of these three women professionally. I look to them for their guidance, their policy advice. I don't always agree with any of the three, but I respect them because I should. I mean, as professionally, like, they do good work. They have really intelligent things to say. I also know them each as people, and I know their character. Again, it's certainly been very painful to watch the attacks, in addition to wasting all of our time, creating a lot of hurt, creating a chilling effect, demoralizing the up and comings in the profession, the people who've been cast to the margins. If you want to get into this, right, I wouldn't be surprised if what's happened over the last week has cost us one of the next Janet Yellens. or one of the next Lisa Cooks. That's a huge loss to not just the economics profession, not just the policy circles. That's really a loss to all the people that economists, policy, and advice touches. And that's a lot of people. So really bad and really stupid. I have known for a long time. I've written on my Macromon blog. I've talked about it on Twitter. I've talked about it in public forums. Economics is a disgrace. It has deep-seated problems. I'm not here to sit as judge and jury. Again, we have a long history. The individuals that I've called out publicly, they're just a symptom of a rot in economics, and I have tried to focus my calling out, my attempting of accountability. That's all this is. Like, people who are not held accountable do not stop. And all I want us to do is stop and just focus on the economics and stop hurting people. Economics, that's what we do. That, again, this has to stop. Economics is a disgrace. It can become not a disgrace. It can become a force for good in the world. That's why I'm an economist. That's why most of us are economists. Let's do it. It has to be accountability. There has to be punishment for behavior like what we have seen over the last week. There have to be examples, learning, just trying. So we can do better. We have to do better. And the very thin silver lining of all of this is economics decided to show its ugly side by going after 3 individuals who are extremely qualified, who have served the public in different ways, whether it's in the government, whether it's advising presidential candidates, working on committees in the Senate, or whether it's communicating economics to people, to the world, giving a voice to a lot of economists via media, journalism. Okay, so all public servants in some form, and all 3 of them with the most character and integrity. So what we are watching economics do, what we are watching the elites, the big boys at the top of the house, the ones that you put on major news networks, the ones you give massive platforms to, we are watching them go after 3 people that are absolutely beloved, absolutely respected, and it is showing economics shame. Shame on economics, and again, an absolute total waste of time. Have fun while your ship is going down, and you're not taking us with you. So, happy. But like I said, we're making it through it. Things have calmed down some. They will flare up again. But let's focus on the economics. Let's get the absolute best people in place, whether it is at the Federal Reserve or at our media or in our universities, and let's do the work. People are depending on us to do the work, and the next generation is depending on us to set the example and the path forward. So go team, and be kind. Come on, we are all in this together, and we have all got to get to the finish line, and it'd be real nice if we got there not battered and bruised from going after each other. Thanks.